Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Instead, I was filming something the other day. It went really well and I loved it, which means it almost certainly won't get commissioned. It's the law of Murphy when it comes to my TV projects. Halfway through, I asked a question. I just asked for a show of hands. And it was a political discussion show, so inevitably there was representation of all sides. Split fairly evenly in the room. Brexit was a big conversational issue, so was the looming general election. But it suddenly occurred to me, and I don't think I've said this to you before this morning, but it suddenly occurred to me that there was almost a sort of chasm on the political landscape. So as I looked at this room full of voters, there was 100 voters in the room. I don't want to speculate too unduly about numbers, but let's say that you had 20 who were happy, genuinely happy with Theresa May, and somehow apparently able to understand what the plan is, and then 20 who were utterly persuaded by Jeremy Corbyn, say another 10 that possibly were flirting with Tim Farron. That left 50. That left half of the room who, although they were probably going to vote Conservative, a lot of them, just in the interest of stability and status quo, didn't feel... Actually, no, scratch that. I don't know how they're going to vote. So that left 50 out of 100 people, more or less entirely unrepresented politically. This was just on a show of hands, but I've been chewing over it ever since, because it seems to me that the largest constituency in Britain, and looking at these council election results, I don't see anything at the moment that would make me change my mind. The largest constituency in Britain at the moment doesn't really know where it sits politically. Let me show you what I mean. I agree with this woman.
Well, there were plenty of voices suggesting what I should do in this. Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
I think the economic arguments are clear. I think being part of a 500 million population trading bloc is significant for us. I think one of the issues is a lot of people will invest here in the UK because it's the UK in Europe. And I think if we were not in Europe, I think there are firms and companies who would be looking to say, do they need actually to develop a mainland Europe presence rather than the UK presence? So I think there are definite benefits for us in economic terms. As I've also mentioned the benefits that I feel in security terms.
But when people are looking at the vote on the 23rd of June, this is not a single issue vote in terms of they need to look, as I have done. What I have done is looked across a range of issues and a range of challenges that the UK will be facing. And this is not a question on the 23rd of June of whether we can survive outside the European Union. It's a question of what is best for Britain's future. And I think if we look at the challenges we will face, the challenges of security, of trade and the economy, that actually looking ahead, Britain's prosperity, the opportunities for people living here in the UK will be more secure, will be better if we're inside the European Union.
Which, I mean, for most people, for many people, is a no-brainer, right? But of course, many people decided consciously to vote to be less secure, and they knew exactly what they were voting for, and it's very condescending to suggest otherwise. But Theresa May pretty much laying down the reality there, the facts that led her to conclude we'd be less safe, less prosperous, less well-off, less secure if we left the European Union. So who the hell is this?
Now, during the Conservative Party leadership campaign, I was described by one of my colleagues as a bloody difficult woman. And I said at the time, the next person to find that out will be Jean-Claude Juncker.
So is that what she means when she calls herself a bloody difficult woman? Is that she says it's 10 o'clock when it's 11 o'clock, she says it's black when it's white, and she changes her mind on the drop of a hat? Because she's also, of course, the politician who expressed concern that people were calling the Conservatives the nasty party many years ago. And yet her action since becoming Prime Minister, since becoming leader of the Labour Party, has effectively, as we saw last night, to annex the even nastier party. UKIP, in a way, became the party that people went to when they felt unwelcome in the Conservative Party because the Conservative Party was trying to be less nasty. the sort of detoxification project undertaken by David Cameron and apparently supported by Theresa May has been thrown into full speed reverse since she became leader, and now the people who left because they wanted somewhere nasty to go are all coming back. She's thrown open the doors and made them feel welcome. So what do you do if you agree with that woman who spoke first, but don't really know what the woman who spoke second is talking about?
What I should do in this, of course, there were quite a lot of voices.
The same woman. Well, you could always turn to this fella.
We campaigned for a yes vote in the referendum. 2/3 of Labour supporters voted yes. The majority of Labour MPs, vast majority, campaigned for a yes vote. That was our position. The referendum result was different, but remember, it was the largest participation in any electoral process in Britain for as long as I can remember, and there was a result, and Parliament has to respect that result.
And yet we are generally, at 10 o'clock every weekday morning, a gathering of politically engaged people. Just generally. We might disagree with each other violently, but I don't think it's conceited for me to describe my audience as politically engaged. What the hell are we supposed to do? I don't get it anymore. I love politics. Again, for the gazillionth time, I wish we were studying this 10 years hence in a classroom rather than actually having to live it. But it seems to me that all of the talk, you see what's happened on the other side of the Atlantic, just to throw in another bone to gnaw on. On the other side of the Atlantic, we yesterday received conclusive proof that the Trump project was designed to encourage people who aren't wealthy to vote to lose their health insurance. This is what the Republicans did yesterday. 24 million people who currently have health coverage that they never had before Barack Obama came in have lost it, potentially. It's early days, but they were cracking out the beers and celebrating at the White House. And the same legislation that was passed the first hurdle yesterday will see very, very rich people get a tax cut. So when people, I sometimes sit here when I talk to you and think, oh, shut up, James. There you go, something else we've got in common. I sit here and I think, oh, shut up, James. It can't be like that. And you remember after the referendum I said to you, I'll tell you why I don't think we can shut up about this. It's because if this kind of con job continues, it will be the NHS next. If you can, and listen again to this, just because I don't want you to think that this is me banging my drum. This is Theresa May, okay? This is back to the first clip. It's very important that you take this on board, because I may not have made it clear enough at the beginning who was talking.
Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
I look at the facts and come to a view. I do believe we are more secure in the EU. I don't know what facts have changed on this front, and this is the woman that is asking us to trust her. And if you're interested in stability and status quo, it's a good offer. I think it's the best offer you're going to get in terms of plausibility. I don't know how much of that is framed by the lens of media coverage and the fact that Paul Dacre likes nothing more than a woman of a certain age who does absolutely everything he tells her to do. This is like his ultimate dream can come true. Not only has he got the political and the immigration victories in place in terms of rhetoric and philosophy, but he's also got a woman who's doing what women are supposed to do, which is exactly what Paul Dacre tells them to do. So it's win-win for the editor of the Daily Mail. But for the rest of us, it's just bonkers. And you sort of search for the thread of logic that runs through it all, and you think, well, people aren't actually going to continue voting in a way that actively and demonstrably damages their personal interest. And then you remember all the people who talk about Trump and Brexit being the same thing. All the people now chomping at the bit for Marine Le Pen, a Holocaust revisionist whose party was founded by Waffen-SS officers. I mean, this is Nazism. It's a bit like, as the wonderful Hugo Rifkin said the other day, it's a bit like the people trying to defend Marine Le Pen at the moment are a bit like if a new Nazi party was running in Germany and it was called the Nazi Party, and sort of hand-wringers in the media were going, well, it's not really the Nazi Party, it's not led by Adolf Hitler, it's led by Adele Hitler. It's a completely different thing, it's got nothing to do with it at all. And all the people that you suspected were secretly fascists in this country but had the wisdom to pretend not to be are now coming out and saying, yeah, I actually like Marine Le Pen. They're not even pretending anymore. A Holocaust revisionist whose party was effectively founded by survivors of the collaborationist regime in Vichy and former Waffen-SS officers. And then you look across the Atlantic and you see 24 million people, many of whom have voted for Donald Trump thinking he was going to help them, who've now woken up to discover that he's helping millionaires get a tax cut and they're losing their health care. So when I say to you the reason why I can't be quiet is because I think if this con continues, the NHS will be next. Well, I then find myself thinking, calm down, mate, don't get carried away. It's, you know, it might not be all that bad. I open up the newspaper this morning and I read a story about GPs apparently wanting to start charging people for services. GPs, not hospitals, not big drug company. GPs, apparently, according to a Rupert Murdoch-owned newspaper. GPs now want to start taking money off us for the most basic of services. So what would you want Theresa May to say? You'd want her to say, look, I think we're doing something. The facts haven't changed. I still think we're going to be less secure and less well off. But I've got a vote. I've got a mandate. My job is to make things as less bad as they can possibly be. But she can't say that because then all the people that have piled into the Conservatives from UKIP would start screaming about genies and unicorns again. So where do normal people go? Where do people who cast their vote, as Theresa May claimed she used to do, according to facts and evidence? What do they do? Juncker behaving like a petulant schoolboy after that meeting last week, but equally to claim that there's some sort of conspiracy in Brussels designed to affect the general election, it's just a barefaced lie. The only influence that Juncker's leak to the German newspaper was going to have upon the British election, by the time it had gone through the mangle of the British media, was the opposite way around. It was going to have people gathering around Theresa May. If you take the genie and the unicorn lobby as emblematic of hard Brexit, then a foreigner, whoever he is, whether it's Barack Obama or Jean-Claude Juncker or Michael Bloody Schumacher, a foreigner standing up and saying, oh yeah, we're out, we're fighting you, put that through the lens of the Daily Mail and the Sun, and that gives votes to Theresa May. How can it possibly be designed to influence the election the other way, to allow her to cast herself as a cross between Boudicca and Minnie Mouse? So, sorry, I've hit 10:15 and I haven't asked you a question yet. Here's the thing. Am I right in thinking that the centre ground of British politics is now deserted, and that a significant number of people listening to this programme have not got a clue who in mainstream British party politics actually represents them? I don't have the frame of history to refer to another period in the 20th century where that would have held true. But right now, 0345 60 60 973, right now, I don't think you're going to get many opportunities to do this anywhere else. If you feel utterly unrepresented politically, give me a call, 0345, and tell me who you are, what you believe, what you want, who speaks for you. I've got a feeling that if there was a box on the ballot come next month that genuinely said none of the above, I think they'd win. Do you? 0345 60 60 973 is the number that you need. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. I don't want to have any arguments this morning. I'm happy to if you do. It's your show as much as it's mine. But I can't shake that sea of hands that went up in a room full of very politically engaged people, the kind of people that turn up to sit in the audience in return for a glass of warm wine to contribute to a television programme that may never be made. That's the definition of politically engaged and opinionated. And about half of them, when I said, is there anyone in the room who just doesn't feel represented at the moment? Half of them put their hands up. If you would have done, give me a call. Talk me through why, where and what. 20 minutes 10 is the time. We weren't allowed to speak about Theresa May's bizarre speech on Wednesday. We weren't allowed to speak about it yesterday, which would have been the obvious time to do it. But just the curious claim that they were trying to rig the British election. I can only presume that they've just looked at Trump and thought, yeah, treat the electorate like a bunch of chomping Burks and you won't go far wrong, especially if you can bring in a bit of nationalism or faux patriotism. And you find yourself thinking, no, we're not that daft in this country. And then you get a barrage of texts and tweets from the kind of British equivalent of the Donald Trump voters who've woken up this morning to realise that draining the swamp meant that they lose healthcare and millionaires get tax cuts. Woohoo! Down with the establishment. Let's take away healthcare from women who've been raped and give tax cuts to millionaires. Strange times. Tim's in Margate. Tim, what's going on?
Oh, Oh, well, I'm deep in the middle of blue kip country down here. So I'm lost. I'm one of those people. I literally have no one to vote.
But even I don't want. This is my fault, and I'm not being ungrateful. I don't want to focus upon sort of constituency-based conundrums, because they're always with us. I mean, you will always have constituencies where you could stick a rosette on Bungle and he'd waltz into Parliament. But I'm talking more about if we did have a French or an American style system and we were voting on a national level, as many people do, would you still feel massively unrepresented, even if...
Absolutely.
Why?
Absolutely. I've got... Because I've either got someone who barely says nothing in Theresa May, and when she does, it's just completely confusing. It's as you were kind of alluding to.
Well, hang on, don't try and unravel it, because you heard that quote. She's absolutely given it a lot of thought and has arrived at the fairly firm conclusion that leaving the European Union would make us less safe and less economically secure. But now she's hell-bent on what exactly?
Exactly. I have no idea. I have no idea what she's hell-bent on. That's the problem. It's leaving a gap everywhere. And then I've got someone on the left who can barely string a sentence together. And I've got nothing in the middle. I mean, we've got Tim Farron, and bless me, I think his message is fairly solid and fairly good, but he doesn't come across as anyone, a majority of the British public would particularly want to vote for. So in many ways, if I was asked for a presidential election, I would struggle putting across anywhere right now. And maybe we need a Macron. Even this morning, Paddy Ashdown writes tweets and does a blog saying we need a Macron. And
but it would be a Macron who, I mean, his party's less than a year old. To have any electoral impact in this country, it would have to be a Macron who could mobilise grassroots support in every or pretty much every constituency in the country. And our system is never, ever going to do that.
And that's the problem. We're really stuck with a system that doesn't allow any sort of new thought, or if it's anything coming through, we have to join a party and influence it, and take years to do that. We've got nothing that can...
How has it happened then? How has the moderate, the modest, the centrist, the evidence-based, the outward-looking, the international, the modern voter ended up so utterly disenfranchised?
I hate to be a kind of, blame the media. I think the media has got some sense in it, because it's a slightly more boring argument, because it's actually quite thoughtful, something you've got to think about, maybe research yourself, have an argument with, and it's not...
This is the beauty of the position, isn't it? This is why the devil has all the best tunes, because I was looking at the Trump thing, and I was wondering how long it would take for the sort of Fox News lemmings to start accusing people pointing out what had happened of being condescending. This is the beautiful result of de-intellectualizing public life, of turning everything into soundbites. So if you turn around, because already I could accuse you of being condescending, like the fellow who started shouting at Tim Farron earlier in the week, for things Tim Farron had never said or done. He'd never called anybody a racist. He'd never said all Leave voters didn't know what they'd voted for. And yet you create that idea that by appealing to evidence, by appealing to facts, you're condescending to these people. But look, people who've never read a book in their life have as much right to an opinion about books as people who've read 100. That seems to be where we are as a country now.
I think we are, and it bothers me that people feel it's okay just to say people, that's completely wrong. You're completely wrong, and have no evidence for that, and that's absolutely fine. And we've seen it with Trump, and we're seeing it increasingly with modern political discourse here, that it's just okay to say, well, you're absolutely wrong, and you say, well, why?
And without immigration, it just doesn't go anywhere, does it? Because without immigration, you don't have that emotional pill, in a way, that emotional poison that is running through the veins of some people on such a scale that it renders them blind to everything else going on around them. And Trump's triumph. Trump's used immigration to get poor people to vote to lose healthcare and give rich people a tax break. It's hilarious if it wasn't real people, and if we lefties didn't actually worry about people not getting healthcare. I'd love to be like a Republican congressman and cracking open the Budweiser, singing a song and laughing about the fact that 24 million people potentially have lost the only healthcare they've ever had.
Well, yeah, I mean, and the same, I think what worries me considerably is it now appears that being fairly honest as a politician really gets you nowhere.
Well, this is what happens when you're honest. Let's just remind ourselves, the people who've just tuned in, this is an honest politician.
We campaigned for a yes vote in the referendum.
Well, this is my fault. I'm putting Axel on the spot here. Poor bloke spinning plates. Give me clip one again. This is an honest politician.
Well, there were plenty of voices suggesting what I should do in this. Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
That's an honest politician.
Yes.
Wouldn't really get her very far, would it, in the current political climate?
No.
Which is, I suspect, why she's turned into this politician.
Now, during the Conservative Party leadership campaign, I was described by one of my colleagues as a bloody difficult woman. And I said at the time, the next person to find that out will be Jean-Claude Juncker.
So Tim, thank you, mate. What she's done there is go from a description of what happens when she uses her brain and her evidence and facts and her knowledge and her understanding and her political experience, and she arrives at a conclusion. She's rejected that approach to politics, and instead she's decided to keep repeating the words bloody difficult woman, because that plays well with people who hate thinking. And similarly, strong and stable leadership, strong and stable leadership, strong and stable leadership. I still don't think Britain is as bovine as the American electorate, but you are looking at a conflation for Brexit and Trump. So many people told us they were linked, they're the same thing. And we've now seen the first incontrovertible evidence that for somebody on Struggle Street, a vote for Donald Trump was a vote to lose your health care and give the money instead to people who were already rich. And I wonder at what point those of us who sat here pointing it out that the emperor is naked, the emperor is naked, the emperor is naked. They're either going to drag us away screaming to the gulags, or we're just gonna fade out of fatigue. You said the emperor is naked, and I suppose the next stage of political debate in Britain is for people to turn around and say, and that'll probably happen on the programme today, I don't care whether or not the emperor is naked. I've heard that clip, but I still think grrr. That is there, right there, a politician's journey from evidence-based fact fan through to soundbite spouter and essentially nationalistic scaremongerer. And she knows what's going to work best with the British electorate. It wouldn't work if the centre ground hadn't been so completely vacated. Again, on one level, I love it. I love it. It's fascinating. On an academic level, I've got to write 3,000 words for an august intellectual journal over the course of the next 28 days. And for the first time since college, I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting stuck into all the texts and all the books and all the analysis. Because when I shut the door of my office and I sit there and I get my laptop out, it's a wonderful place to be. And then, of course, every hour or so, when I press return or read back over what I've written, I'm reminded that I'm not just writing about this mess, I'm living it. So are my children. It's 10:30. How have we ended up with an almost empty centre ground in British politics and a Prime Minister who has, as I think we've demonstrated this morning, consciously and deliberately abandoned evidence-based thinking and politics and gone instead for full-on UKIP-style hollow sloganeering and meaningless sound bites? Our answer's simple, because it works. And then, of course, when you point out why it works, you become part of the problem. You become condescending and sneering. It's a perfect pincer movement. Absolutely perfect pincer movement. And it begins, as everything does, with the denigration of education, denigration of intellectual life, the denigration of thinking. Once you've pulled that off, everything else falls into place. And the less educated people are, the less capable they are of articulating how they feel, which means that if they're feeling unhappy, it's a hell of a lot easier to turn it into inchoate anger than it would be if they actually had the tools and the vocabulary to work things out for themselves. I'm going to play this one more time, all right, just to show you what the difference is between a politician who bases her opinions on evidence.
Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
So look at the facts and come to a view, right? post-Trump, you could see why perhaps she thought that that's not the way to win votes anymore. And then looking at the British equivalent of that kind of bovine politicking, you'd go the UKIP way. And instead of looking at the facts and coming to a view, you'd throw in a bit of sort of nationalism, try and portray all foreigners as the enemy, and then throw in a couple of cheeky sound bites.
Now, during the Conservative Party leadership campaign, I was described by one of my colleagues as a bloody difficult woman. And I said at the time, the next person to find that out will be Jean-Claude Juncker.
Jean-Claude Juncker this morning has said that the European Union's negotiating position will be conducted with complete transparency. And he's a dodgy character, Juncker. He's a very easy man to portray as an enemy. That's why they'll choose him. They won't choose Donald Tusk or Angela Merkel or some others. They'll go for the weakest point. But there you have it. There, in a nutshell, in two simple quotes, less than a year apart, you have the difference between someone who looks at the facts and comes to a view, and someone who thinks that the British electorate is daft enough to swallow lines like bloody difficult woman and strong and stable leadership. And how is she going to get away with it? Well, because what are the alternatives? 10:36. Jim is in Walthamstow. Jim, what would you like to say?
First of all, hi. I'm a university lecturer, so I talk to a lot of students and about that sort of thing. And basically, we've got kind of two groups of students. First of all, you've got the apathetic students,
yes,
who just don't really care. They don't see the application of politics to their life, which obviously gets me quite angry. But you've then got the kind of second group.
I'm quite nostalgic for that. I wish we still lived in a time where everything was so sort of calm and stable that you could, as a young person, really see little point in getting stuck in. But you're right to be angry and worried now that we're in a time of such uncertainty and flux. To not realise that their futures are at stake is potentially suicidal.
And then you've got the second group of students who I find really engaging and I really like talking to. But these are the students that are still forming their views.
Yes.
They're still trying to understand politics, and so they might find green issues really, really important, but then might find kind of immigration really important, or
yes,
they might think about education is really important, but then not really care about employment or whatever. And so there's no one party that actually really, really speaks to them, and there never will be. As we get older,
but there was a broad strand into which they could fit, and a strand with a realistic chance of making an electoral impact. My fear is that there isn't now.
I think as the left become kind of more diverse, I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything too controversial when I say that as we get older, kind of people become more conservative, perhaps more small c conservative, and as people get older, they kind of look more towards the right to vote, and so you've got kind of younger people voting left, old people voting conservative, and so the older people are more certain in their views. They will vote.
I give this a lot of thought because I seem to be going in the opposite direction as I get older, except on some issues. I
was sure on individual levels, yes.
But it's not. I don't know that it's in a sort of inevitable political shift. I think what we have in Britain, in particular, is the way that the word lefty has been demonised. The idea is that as you're older, what you've got, you are increasingly persuaded, if you expose yourself to even a small part of the British media, you're increasingly persuaded that so-called lefties want to come and take it off you and give it to one-legged Somalian asylum seekers. And that makes you more right-wing. It makes you more concerned about either going backwards or pressing pause on where we are now. Young people see the future as a changing landscape into which, they will hopefully fit in a beneficial way, but they can still, at this point in proceedings, hope that everybody else does all right as well. The older you get, the more self-interested you get, I think I would say. Yes,
I think that's certainly it. So the more self-interest, and you've got kind of the nasty parties that would say, no, like, look out for yourself. Look out for yourself. It's about neoliberal ideas of personal kind of...
Except when you put on the American lens and you realise that a lot of people who are voting to, they think, protect what they've got are actually now voting to lose what they've got and surrender it in tax rises to extremely wealthy people who can afford the membership fees at Donald Trump's golf clubs.
And then we come back to education and sound bites. And
now we're being condescending and sneering.
I tend to do that quite a lot as a lecturer. But,
it's brilliant. It only works. So you'll be, you're dealing with undergraduate level people. It only works if you can sort of get it. If you can imagine a car that's only got 2 gears. This is where we are. If you've got someone like that poor fella shouting at Tim Farron the other day, talking more or less gibberish, but opening up the Daily Mail the next day to see himself cast as some sort of folk hero. His own niece is on Twitter describing him as a liability and talking about how she's thinking of changing her name. She's so embarrassed. But if you've only got 2 gears, you don't understand what's going on with all the people who've got gears 3, 4 and 5, and that's condescending and sneering.
Absolutely. We've very much sort of slipped into a binary kind of political system, and it's either Leave or Remain. It's either Tory or Labour. Is it about anything other than foreigners being the problem and foreigners not being the problem? Does it actually, if we're really honest, and I know a lot of people like to pretend that there's some sort of grand libertarian project at play, or it's about sovereignty and it's about destiny. Bottom line, either you think foreigners are the reason why your life hasn't gone as well as it should have done, or you don't. I don't see. I see a lot of complicated issues in the voices that I hear from the students, and I try and kind of address those and say it's not a binary situation. Unfortunately, the press would have you believe it is, and there are no grey issues. And although I very, very much believed in a Remain situation, there were people talking about a left-wing exit for kind of reasons on that side. And I could understand those arguments. Those arguments would only hold if we had a kind of a socialist government who were happy to kind of sit on those ideals. But like to actually sort of say it's complicated is not a popular idea.
Well, no, and that's why I've arrived at the bleak conclusion I've arrived at about the foreigner question, because I spend my life swimming around in the grey areas, and yet it would appear that both banks in between the grey, if the river is the grey area, most people are on one bank or the other. Either you think that the reason why your life isn't going as well as you would like it to go is because of foreigners, or women, or gays, or disabled people, or poor people, or single mothers, or all the usual suspects, or you're on the other bank and you just know that's not true. And then, to prove my point, this text, thank you, Jim, I'll be with Fung next very briefly, but this text is brilliant. James, don't oversimplify. We voted Leave. She is carrying out voter requirements. I can't wait for British industry to start making washing machines, spin dryers, ovens, etc., and for you to say Brexit was right. See, on one level, mate, nor can I. I would love that to happen. It would be great news for everybody. But where the analogy, the rather unkind analogy that I used about the number of gears that a car has comes into play with your text, is that gear 3 is how. So you tell me, I can't wait for British industry to start making washing machines, spin dryers, ovens, etc., and for you to say Brexit is right. And I say, how is that going to happen? And then you start trying to explain to me, and I say, yes, but if we're going to be selling into that market, which currently costs us nothing, the chances are that in the short term at least, we'll be having to pay big tariffs. And all the raw materials that you need to make washing machines and ovens and spin dryers will be coming from markets that do not trade in the pound. So the fact that the pound has lost a lot of value against other currencies, chiefly the dollar, also the euro, is going to mean that your operating costs, your manufacturing costs, are higher in the future than they would be now. And the reason why we're not making washing machines and ovens and spin dryers in this country now is because the manufacturing costs are too high. Gear 4, you're arguing that we're going to have more manufacturing when it costs more to make stuff in this country than it does now, and the reason why we're not making stuff in this country now is because it would be so expensive. Gear 5 then becomes, well, you tell me. Gear 5 is, hang on a minute, the only really conceivable way in which you can bring business into a country that is less well placed to support business than it was is to give massive tax cuts to businesses, to erode worker protection, give workers fewer rights in the workplace so that bosses who are all about growth and money and profit and dividends for shareholders have got even more freedom to effectively cull the workforce and take the money off the top. What was the line the other day? What company was it in America? It was United Airlines, made a big announcement. We need to dig this quote out. It's just perfect. It's brilliant. But we're in gear 5 now, so it's pointless. Everybody who's only got 2 gears is already got their fingers in their ears going, oh, you lost, get over it. Ramona, I don't care if my children are going to be poor. My passport's going to be blue. The United Airlines quote was from a big fund manager in America. United Airlines made a big announcement trying to claw back their credibility, restore their reputation after that dreadful footage of them battering a passenger on air, and they're giving bigger pay rises to their staff. And there's a quote from a fellow who's effectively saying that this is a disaster. They seem to be prioritising the workforce over the investors. And that's on the record. Prioritising the workforce over the investors is now out there as a ridiculous way to run a company. And yet, boom, Gear 5. That's what you're voting for. You want to build washing machines, spin dryers and ovens, you've got to create a country in which the workforce is even further behind the interests of the investors than it already is. But I'm wasting my breath. If we had compulsory voting in this country and a box entitled none of the above appeared on the ballot box, and you could sort of turn off all of your other political concerns, do you, like me, think that the none of the above party would be in with a very good chance of winning? 0345 6060 973. And, you know, if you think it's all about Brexit, then your challenge today, very, very simply, is to explain why you've put all your eggs in this basket.
Well, there were plenty of voices suggesting what I should do in this. Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
It's all the things that one doesn't understand, that all the people who like thinking struggle with, is how people who are on side with the Prime Minister and her bloody difficult reputation and all of the other rest of it, why don't you need her to explain to you what's changed? Answer: because it is pretty much all about pretending everything's a war and pretending that foreigners are always the enemy. As long as you don't think too deeply, because if you start thinking too deeply, you'd be thinking, well, hang on a minute, Rupert Murdoch interferes in every election we've ever had. Hang on a minute, the British electorate hasn't returned a decision that the Sun editorial didn't want since before 1979. Foreigners interfering in our elections. So she plays to this wonderful atavistic conscience. Foreigners are interfering in our election, while having the editor of the Daily Mail, which is owned, I think last time I checked, the Daily Mail and General Trust was registered in Bermuda. Rupert Murdoch, an American citizen, ex-Australian, interfering in our elections. No, different types of foreigners. And it all boils down to that. There's foreigners interfering in our elections. So she's going to get away with abandoning, what was the line? Looking at the facts and coming to a view. But why should I look at the facts and come to a view when I can mobilise 30 to 40% of the country just by telling them that we're at war with foreigners? In this case, Jean-Claude Juncker, a relatively pathetic individual who, frankly, no one should be frightened of. Not talking about Barnier. He's the one we've got to worry about. Not talking about him. Not talking about the bank that announced yesterday, I forget whether it's JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, that's shipping, it's announced the 3 cities that are getting all the jobs that are coming out of London. Do you know that half of housing benefit in this country is covered by the tax bill of the top 5,000 taxpayers in Britain? And we're waving goodbye to lots of them. And all the people who sat here, not here specifically, but all the people who told you a couple of years ago, or back in 2009, 2010, don't bash the bankers, we really, really need them, who had a point. My argument was always, yeah, we don't want to bash them, we don't want to hang them, I just want them to pay even more tax than they pay already and be a little bit more regulated so they don't leave us off another fiscal cliff. All the people who coined that rhetoric, don't bash the bankers, don't bash the bankers, don't bash the bankers, to a man and woman, will not be mentioning the fact that the bankers are now leaving. Because that's how con jobs work. If you look at the facts and come to a view, and you believe that the banking industry is important to Britain, you're having a nightmare. But if you're only really interested in getting to the next rung on the ladder, the next election victory, you don't care about looking at the facts and coming to a view. You've got a very convenient foreigner here, Jean-Claude Juncker, and you can start employing the language of war, which is what she's done. The Telegraph carried a piece yesterday, which actually appeared under the headline. It's like the reparations after the First World War. The European Union are trying to impose World War I style reparations on us, but it will only make the British more united. Do you know how Germany responded to the extremities of World War I reparations? Yes, by becoming Nazi and electing Adolf Hitler. So just in the subtext of that Daily Telegraph headline, you actually have out there now in the public arena, yeah, well, if they carry on like this, we'll become like the Nazis. It's quite incredible. And yet, because people have only got 2 gears, due to education in some cases, willfulness in others, you never get to gear 3. Gear 3 is the point at which surely being a Nazi is bad, but then you've got all the people in this country cheering for Marine Le Pen, the leader of a party that was founded by the remnants of the collaborationist Vichy Nazi regime, a party founded by former members of the Waffen-SS. But it's all right. It's Adele Hitler, not Adolf Hitler. Fung's in Islington. Fung, what would you like to say?
I just wonder what you think about the depth of political talent right now in Parliament that doesn't seem to be putting any real scrutiny on either of the positions that both the leaders seem to be taking going up towards the general election.
No, well, there isn't much talent in Parliament, or if there is, it's not. We're not seeing it. We've got some of the most self-interested and arguably dangerous politicians at the front of both parties. On one side, leading the country, arguably, well, just to quote Theresa May, leading the country into a less secure and less wealthy future, and on the other side, I mean, leading the Labour Party into oblivion.
Well, they both seem to be obsessed by party politics, which is understandable because you think about their career paths. Both of them have never done anything different. Their whole lives would have been absorbed by managing party politics. They've not really had to manage anything in the real world. So you can imagine their psychology, right? They're just going back to instinct when they're under pressure like everybody does, and they're looking after their own interests. So when they've got into power, you think, well, why did Jeremy Corbyn fight for Remain when everything in his instinct says he was a leaver? And why does Theresa May fight with all her instinct now?
I don't see them on the same page, Fung. I think I can easily understand why Theresa May is doing what she's doing. She's looked at UKIP, she's looked at Donald Trump, and she's thought, I've been treating the electorate as vaguely intelligent and decent for the last 30 years. What a mug I am. I'll treat them as chomping bovine idiots who will punch themselves in the face if I tell them that we're at war with Jean-Claude Juncker, and I'll win. And she's right. Jeremy Corbyn, I'm afraid I have no idea what he's up to. I'd love him to come in and tell me. I really would.
Well, what I mean is, although I agree with everything what you just said, if you've been a career politician, you're going to do the best for your career and your mates at work. So, although I completely understand what Theresa May is doing, she's doing it from a very self-interested, not national-interested point of view. Because if you had a job and then you decide to go into politics, you're probably going to take a massive pay cut if you're any good, right? And then you.
No, mate, come on, Fung. Well, if you're a teacher or a doctor or a nurse or a decent newspaper journalist these days, you're not going to take a pay cut to go into. The only people who take a pay cut in...
if you're a head teacher and you
I didn't say a head teacher, mate. I didn't say a head teacher. I said a teacher, which is going to be 90% of the teaching workforce or more. So it's not true. This is even a young idealist like you is falling into the trap of thinking that success equals epic income. That's the Trumpian way.
That's not true. That's not true, because I used to be a banker and I left it, so I can see the difference. Right, I can see the difference. But what I mean is, like, if you are a talented individual and professional, you've been exposed to, say, the global economy, right? Yeah. And you're a lawyer or an industrialist, and then you choose to go into politics like the guy that used to run John Lewis, right? He's trying to be a mayor in the Midlands, right? You do it because you have a fundamental belief in why you're getting into politics, because you're doing it to make a difference because you see it from the outside.
I hope you're right. I think, to use Donald Trump as an example, which is perhaps unfair, you're doing it because it appeals to both your ego and your ambitions to enrich yourself even further at the expense of ordinary people. If you made all your money out of gambling and flogging dodgy golf caps made in China with a fancy emblem on the front, you hold the purchaser, you hold the public in incredibly low esteem. So I hope you're right about the John Lewis fella.
But that's because you're born rich. If you're Donald Trump and you're born in a certain kind of social isolation anyway, because that's what being rich does, right? He won't be like normal in the sense that he wouldn't have a normal life of meeting all different kinds of people all of his life. He wouldn't have gone to the same schools. He wouldn't have, he'd always been the top of the tree, right? But if you go into politics and you have, say, a 20-year career and you've done very well for 20 years, you want to express yourself in public life, you're probably going to do it out of principle. But if you don't have that life outside of politics, right? You're going to be completely clouded.
So we need somebody in their mid-40s who's made a modicum of success in one or two or three other professional fields and is motivated entirely by the national interest rather than the narrow party interest, and isn't going to con the British people into thinking that foreigners are to blame for all of their problems, and isn't going to allow anybody to govern solely on the say-so with the mandate of people who've only got two gears. Have you got anyone in mind, Fung?
Well, Macron's doing it all right in France.
That we haven't got the mechanism in place to build a party that you need to be Macron. And I'm going to carry on with this for a little bit longer. And obviously, you're not just welcome to continue. You're absolutely duty-bound to contribute. If you don't contribute, then I inflict even more of my own ponderings upon you. But I think we're fairly clear, given that slightly unfortunate archive clip of Theresa May talking about Brexit, describing herself as looking at the facts and coming to a view, and the view is that we will be worse off and less safe. Nothing has happened to change that view. Nothing material has happened to change that view. All that's happened to change her public pronouncements is that she's become leader of a party that is committed to following through on Brexit, despite not even having a majority of its own members. Why? Because the electorate, the people, have spoken. Why have the people spoken? Because they've been persuaded that we're at war and foreigners are the enemy, and the only way we can somehow stick it to Johnny Foreigner is to leave the European Union, even if it makes us worse off and less safe. And if you think that's a condescending, sneering analysis, just have a look over the pond at that other great example of anti-establishment politicking, the election of Donald Trump, and see that in the last 24 hours, 24 million people have seen the first step taken towards being stripped of the only healthcare they've ever had. And in the same breath, very, very rich people, the highest earners in the country, are getting a relatively huge tax cut. It's just true. But of course, if you never get out of second gear, it doesn't matter. It's the same way you say the foreigners are interfering in our election. But not Rupert Murdoch, other foreigners. It's so blindingly obvious to anybody with gears 3, 4 or 5 that we struggle to understand how people who've only got 2 gears can still be stuck on the hard shoulder. But you like it there. Or do you? I don't know. Who represents you? I have in my life, I think I can tell you this without fear or favour, I voted for all 3 of the major political parties in this country in various different elections. I have even cast a vote for a Conservative politician. Regular listeners will know when, where and why. I voted for the Liberal Democrats and I voted for the Labour Party. Why? Because, facts are fluid. They change. When the facts change, sir, I change my mind. What do you do? As it stands now, I don't know who I can vote for. If we had a head of state, if we elected our head of state, if we had a French or an American-style system where you cast a vote on a national stage rather than a constituency stage, I would not know what to do. And I think that describes a majority of people listening to this programme. Let's find out. Would you? Just give me a call if you fall into that category and tell me why, how you've ended up falling into that category. How have you ended up feeling, or indeed being, so utterly unrepresented, democratically speaking? 5 minutes after 11 is the time. More results. Actually, I haven't really been sharing with you. Labour have lost more than 50 seats so far. UKIP has failed to win any seats so far. Susan Evans has described UKIP's future as much more than a single-issue party, and Paul Nuttall is, I think he's due to turn out for Real Madrid tonight, isn't he? So he'll probably be slightly distracted from the electoral council results. 0345 60 60973. How have you ended up being unrepresented in British democracy? John's in Malton. John, what would you like to say?
Good morning to you, James.
Hello, John.
First started listening to you after I heard you'd upset a politician on the Newsnight programme.
Me? Upset politicians? Never.
Yeah,
Never.
Yeah, and I started enjoying what you were saying, but then slowly but surely I started not enjoying what you were saying over certain things. I think I'm a middle-aged man. I'm just your Joe Public average. I voted for Tories once in '83 because I worked in docks and I worked with dockers, so I knew what it was like.
Yeah.
I voted Liberal and I voted Labour and I voted Green. I'm totally and utterly confused what to do. I was on the referendum for the EU. My wife and I, it was heart-wrenching for us. We just did not know what to do. And we made a decision in the end, which we thought was right. We spent time, we read, we watched television, we listened to the radio, and the same with this. I haven't got a clue who to vote for. I am naturally leaned towards the Labour Party, but they seem to just have lost the plot. James, I live in North Yorkshire.
Yes, I know.
but I was born and bred in Boston, and we left Boston about 12 years ago. So I've seen both sides. When I go back home to Boston, I see what it's like. And I also travel to docks up and down the country and talk to just ordinary working people. And there's a lot of people like me. The Labour Party, I'm going to get probably upset, the Labour Party should be for reducing immigration. If they listen to people like I listen to on docks up and down the country and inland warehouses and rail terminals, they should have done something about that. But because it seems to me, and I actually joined the Labour Party when Jeremy Corbyn got voted in because I was so impressed with the man, but after 8 months, I've dropped it because
Why?
It seems to be.
I mean, if any politician represents a rejection of the notion that immigration is to blame for the country's ills, it would be Jeremy Corbyn.
You have to run that past me again, James.
Well, he's pretty much the only mainstream politician who's got the guts to stand up and tell people that immigration isn't the reason why they're not being paid enough or not working enough or getting enough hours. It's because of their bosses. That is, to me, the heart of Jeremy Corbyn's rhetoric.
The simple fact is, to me, James, that people like me don't believe that. And
Which is why I'm confused that you joined the Labour Party because you like Jeremy Corbyn, when he is the only mainstream British politician, frontline British politician, to stand up and tell you that you're wrong to blame immigration.
Unfortunately, as it goes with elections, you get a manifesto. There's certain things you strongly agree with, there's certain things you strongly disagree with, and you have to pick the best from a bad bunch.
But you chose immigration as the biggest, and then you joined a party because of a politician who is the most strident rejecter of that conclusion. It's just a bit. I mean, it highlights your confusion. It highlights what we're talking about today.
And I think he's deluded. I think he's deluded in that. I think if he came up and walked the same dock roads as I do and talk to the same people as I do and meet people who are on 0 hours, agency dock workers who are treated like rubbish, the money
and it's so easy to persuade them that that's because of immigration, not because of the people that have put them on the 0-hour contracts and denuded the trade unions. When you voted Labour in 1983, it was because of the trade union movement.
I voted Tory in 1983, James.
When did you vote Labour?
I've voted Labour repeatedly since then, and I've flirted.
Oh, since 83, because you've seen the retreat of trade union power and the loss of the workers' rights, and now you've joined the other side that thinks it's all the fault of immigrants, which is fine. I get that.
No. You see, this is what you do, James. You say it's not that this is a term used by lots of people. I work on ships, I've slept on ships, I've eaten on ships. I work with foreigners from all over the world. I work with people from the EU, Dutch, Germans, Belgians, French, and when I talk to seamen and I talk to the officers, most of them say the same as me. They go, this Europe thing's fine, but it's just gone too far. There's too many immigrants coming into our country. But I find that they have the same. I talk to Polish people, Latvians, Hungarians as well. They are exactly the same as me, and they have the same values as me.
And I'm not going to argue with you. There's millions of them. There's absolutely loads of them, and more and more and more and more. But they are the opposite of what Theresa May described when she talked about evidence-based, looking at the facts and arriving at a view. If I come along and tell you that the reason why you're not getting the contract that you want, or the job that you want, or the wages that you want, or the lifestyle that you want, is the fault of really complicated, difficult political changes over the course of 30 years that have seen workers' rights and trade union power deliberately and cynically eroded. It's seen reinvestment of profits into companies removed and replaced with bigger dividends for shareholders. It's seen the politics of soundbites and scaremongering absolutely magnified by the Daily Mail and the Sun, the two biggest selling newspapers in the country, and everything framed as a war against foreigners. You'd have to be made of flint, crossed with genius to resist it. It's no mystery that people can't.
Yeah, James, you're baffling me with science now. I'm only.
I'm not, mate. I'm not, John.
Man.
I'm not.
That's the thing, James. You see,
this is gear 3.
I get up every morning, and the first thing I do when I go on the internet is check the BBC News. Right, I check the BBC News and the local news, and then because I think like a lot of people, I haven't got the time or the energy in my life, because of circumstances I won't go into, to start researching things. So what do? I'm a typical person. I flick onto the Daily Mail online, and I flick onto the Sun online. I don't believe a lot of things I say, but they make it so easy to read, and I look at it generally down my nose when I read the Daily Mail and think, well, zero.
Seeping in, though, mate. Seeping in.
Well, no, it isn't seeping on, because I actually live and work in the reality of it, and I quite understand that if...
So are you looking down your nose, is it, or are they describing a reality?
The trouble is they've got hints of the truth. And the thing is, James, it's a bit like financial pensions and things like that. Years ago, I could be deluded in this. Years and years ago, you used to get a pension and just leave it. You didn't have to do anything with it. You knew the company was going to look after you. Now, when you take out a pension or one thing or another, they say, oh, how do you want to invest it? And we haven't got a clue, so you've got to get a financial advisor. People, ordinary working people, we haven't got time, James, to study and see. We have to trust the people that are telling us things.
And who are you going to trust? Are you going to trust this person?
Well, there were plenty of voices suggesting what I should do in this. Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
This is what you're talking about. You're too busy, you've got too much on your plate, you haven't got the inclination or the energy to actually dig down into the facts, so you trust the politicians to look at the facts and come to a view. That's who she used to be, or are you going to trust who she's become?
Now, during the Conservative Party leadership campaign, I was described by one of my colleagues as a bloody difficult woman. And I said at the time, the next person to find that out will be Jean-Claude Juncker.
With whom we are at war because he is a foreigner. So you have a simple choice. Do you trust the politician who looks at the facts and comes to a view, or do you trust the politician who acts as a loudhailer for the websites you've just described yourself as looking down your nose at, while simultaneously recognising the reality they allegedly describe? It's your choice.
Yeah, well, as far as the Tories are concerned, at the end of the day, to me, and again, I could just be being too dogmatic or whatever the word is, it all comes down to money with Tories, and it all comes down to big business in the end. When I argue with my son about this, I say the capitalist system is good, but there has to be safeguards, and those safeguards have gone now. It is good that people can make money. It is good that you can try, but there has to be safeguards that the people like I've been, I'm not now because I'm in a better position, are protected. The people who can't get...
And historically, who has done that? Who has protected those who's put those safeguards in place? Historically, mate.
Yeah, it's historically.
It's not a trick question, and I'm running out of time. Historically, who has put workers' rights ahead of owners' profits?
The Labour Party, but I'm still one of the people who likes Tony Blair. I still like Tony Blair.
Well, that's why we're talking about the vacated centre ground, and yet he's the man that everybody holds responsible for the immigration that you and so many of the people you meet are convinced is the reason why they've got rubbish working conditions.
I'm not convinced it's the. I'm not saying that, James. I'm saying
I apologise.
It is part of the reason, and in places like Boston, you want to go to Boston, James.
I've been to Boston. I've been to Boston. I've been to quite a lot of areas of high immigration, and I completely understand why people are frustrated by it. Completely understand it, but I get equally upset and frustrated by the workers who are giving birth in toilets because they're frightened of taking a day off or taking time off because they won't get any shifts next week. Here's what I can't do, John, and I don't want to be a person who can. I'm sorry if this upsets you. I don't want to turn into a person who is more upset according to how people get treated based on where they came from. The only way you protect a workforce is to protect every single member of it, my friend. And you, without realising it, you've swallowed the divide and rule Kool-Aid.
No, I haven't, James.
You have. If it's all the fault of immigrants, you can't protect the workforce.
James. I haven't, James, because I lived in the era when the dockers ruled the roost, and they told the bosses what to do.
And the pendulum had swung too far to the left, many argue. But the bottom line is, if you want to protect workers' rights, it has to be all workers. And as long as you've got that little voice in the back of your head saying, well, actually, no, I think we need to get rid of some of them first, or we need, especially, you know, the foreign ones, we need to get... And I know this is not nice for you to hear. Nobody likes looking in the mirror. But what you have phoned me up and told me is that you really feel passionately about workers' rights, but actually, the top priority, the really big issue that people are concerned about is immigration. You cannot fix workers' rights until you stop defining workers and their right to rights according to where they were born. Fact, mate. Gear 4, 11:17. How have we ended up here. Where? Well, in a weird place where the woman who's leading us, Bodicea style, towards confrontation with our former friends and partners in Europe is, as far as we know, still persuaded, having looked at the facts and come to a view that, as she said in an interview not that long ago, we'll be worse off and less safe. So, you want the explanation, that's all. And you sit here with 5 gears or 4 gears and you think, how can people not want an explanation as to what's changed? And the answer is, if you've only got 2 gears, you don't care. You're just going to keep shouting about destiny, sovereignty, foreigners and passports. And I know people find that really offensive and think that I'm being condescending and sneering, in which case, explain to me, using all the long words you want and all the sophisticated rhetoric you please, why you don't care that Theresa May doesn't have to explain why she's apparently changed her mind. How you can have confidence in a leader that said that it was time to stop people calling the Conservatives the nasty party, to try to move away from that perception, and yet now has annexed UKIP, the party that people went to when they felt alienated by attempts to be less nasty, and has gone in the blink of an eye from describing leaving the European Union as something that would leave us less well off and less safe into something that must be pursued at all costs, even if it means walking away without any deal at all. Answer: Gear 3. Just means you're asking how and why. How and why is Gear 3. What and when is Gear 1 and 2. What and when? What do you want? When do you want it? What do you want? This. When do you want it? Now. Okay, Gear 3. How are you going to get it? No one goes to Gear 3 anymore. And to prove it, the Trump thing is perfect. So what you have now is, loving your liberal tears. Yeah, ha, Trump won, get over it. And you go, yeah, but the reason why people like me didn't want Donald Trump to win is because we believed, while simultaneously hoping we were wrong, we believed that poor people were going to end up worse off and rich people were going to end up better off. It just seemed to me that everything about his modus operandi was both dishonest and self-enriching. Everything. So you sit here and you go, yeah, I mean, okay, I kind of get the, build the wall stuff. Foreigners, we're at war. Foreigners are the enemy. But surely you see it's a bigger priority to have someone in place who will at least try to protect poor people from the encroachments of the super rich. And then you get legislation which took its first step towards becoming law yesterday, which will absolutely stone cold, unless, and again, I'm essentially centrist and liberal in my outlook, so I'm open to being corrected, as opposed to the people at either other extreme. If I've got this wrong, and I've read into it deeply, I'm subscribing to all manner of American media now, it genuinely is the case that they're taking money away from providing healthcare for 24 million people and putting it into tax cuts for the very, very rich. It just is the case. And yet still you'll get the chomping bigots cheering. They're literally cheering as rich people get the money that should be spent on their own healthcare. And that's what happens if you've only got 2 gears and everything is framed as a war against foreigners. It's the only way I can make sense of things. And suddenly I can make sense of the 1930s in Germany. I can make sense of the rise of Mussolini. I can make sense of Vladimir Putin's domestic policies. Everything is a war against foreigners. Everything is a war against foreigners. Which means if you're not a foreigner, you're on the same side as the warrior, even when you are cheering the fact that they're taking money that would pay for you to get treated in hospital and giving it to someone who can afford the membership fees at Donald Trump's golf course. Shut up, James. Get over it. Cry your liberal tears. Mate, I'm fine. I'm fine. Problem with being essentially liberal and centrist is, and Christian Democrat, so you have this unshakable belief that if you've been dealt a relatively lucky hand of cards in life, you have a responsibility to look out for those who've been less lucky. But those who are less lucky are screaming abuse at you because you're suggesting that foreigners aren't the reason why they're not where they want to be. It's actually the fault of the people in charge. That's British politics. That's American politics. It's possibly all politics. And it means we have no centre ground in Britain. And that means huge swathes of the nation feel utterly unrepresented. I'd be happy to vote for the Theresa May in clip 1. Personally, I could do that. Theresa May in clip 2, that's just a loudhailer applied to the front page of the Daily Mail. That's one person who's made that journey. Unfortunately, that one person is leading the whole country. 26 after 11, Pete's in Portsmouth. Pete, what do you want to say?
Hi, James. Morning.
All right, Pete. I'm ready for the weekend, mate. How about you, eh?
yeah, I am. Yeah, it's Friday and it's all good.
It's my wedding anniversary today. I've got to get all the politics out before I take Mrs. O'Brien out for lunch. Otherwise, it might be 17 years and out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I just feel like I'm in neutral. I have absolutely no idea what the hell is going on. You played that first clip. I never used to like Theresa May when she was Home Secretary. I thought she was a bit, I don't know, I just didn't take to her. But listening to those clips, I'd rather have her back, actually, because the second clip is just a load of noise. I mean, anyone can go around and say, "Oh, I'm going to, give him a slap, and I'm going to tell him what's what." But what are you going to actually tell him? I don't know what's going on. All of the arguments and the debates and everything last year, I loved all that sort of thing. Discussing stuff with friends in the pub and what have you. And now it's just gone for me anyway. It's gone completely dead. I have absolutely no idea who's going to do what, when they're going to do it. And
doesn't matter though, because you've got two choices: either you stay confused and neutral and baffled and a little bit worried, or you sign up for the war against the foreigner, and then you just wait to see who Paul Dacre decides the latest foreigner to go to war with is.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not really. I don't think that's what I want to do. I want someone to sort of resolve these issues, not make
foreigners are interfering in our election, mate. Donald Trump, Rupert. Sorry, not them. Jean-Claude Juncker. The other fella, Tusk, interfering in our election. Outrageous behaviour. And yet we've got people on side expressing publicly a desire to see Marine Le Pen win the French election in this country.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. What
are we going to do, Pete? You and me. Let's fix it now. You and me. What are we going to do? You got Portsmouth covered. I'll take care of West London. The rest will all fall into place. What's mission number one? What's top priority?
I have absolutely no idea. I don't even know how I'm going to vote.
I'd vote for you. Honesty. I have no idea, but I'm a decent fella, and I know it's not all the fault of foreigners. Vote for me. That's all you need.
That's it, yeah.
It's not difficult. Don't blame foreigners, party.
No, that's it, yeah. That's all you need. That's all you need.
Mate, mind how you go.
Yeah, thanks, James. Take care.
Do you actually, before you go, do you genuinely not know? You have no idea? Because this is the fear, isn't it? That Conservatives apparently are worried about complacency because the overnights have been relatively favourable. Perhaps not quite the scale of destruction that some Labour people feared or some commentators predicted. But the Conservatives are now going to worry that their supporters are going to think it's already in the bag, so they're not going to go out and vote. You're tempted not to go out and vote because there's nobody you actually want to vote for.
That's it, yeah. And I don't. And like I say, all I hear is noise coming from Theresa May, and I don't actually. I can honestly say I don't actually know what she's about. All I keep hearing is we're going to be stronger. We're going to be this. We're going to be that. But how? You're not giving me anything to say. Well, actually, I agree with what you're saying.
It doesn't matter because if it doesn't all come true, we've already got the blame in place. Foreigners.
Yeah.
In this case, European Union leaders, our former allies, the people who have conspired with Britain to provide 70 years of peace across continental Europe. They're the enemy now. And that telegraph line, I kid you not, that telegraph line effectively compares post-Brexit Britain to post-World War I Germany and warns that if the Europeans don't do what we want, then what? We'll become more united? What happened when Germany became more united post-World War I reparations? Hitler. Happy days. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are just wondering why so much of the country appears to have been sort of abandoned politically, regardless of how you voted in Brexit. If, like Theresa May, you believe that it is going to leave us less well off and less secure, where do you put your vote? I would argue, oddly, that Jeremy Corbyn was more pro-leave than Theresa May was. Just from perception and anecdote and absence of fire and passion. A lot of you are wondering, and don't be rude, there's no need to be rude, especially not if you're a Liberal Democrat. If you actually are Liberal, why don't you continue to show a single sign of hope or support for the Lib Dems, who you agree with every single one of their policies? Johnny, mate, I understand your frustration. I can only work with the calls that I get. If someone wants to ring me up and say, I don't feel dispossessed and unrepresented, James, I'm Liberal Democrat and I think we're on the march, then my first question, gear 3, will be about how you process the local election results, but it's there. I mean, it's there. The phone line's there, Johnny. Give me a ring and tell me why the Liberal Democrats could fill this gap that many of us have described. Now, 2 calls from Malton. It's a beautiful part of North Yorkshire. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's I think it's a food capital of the county, actually. Malton is one of those places that has redesigned itself as an ex-post-market town and really embraced food. But John rang from there earlier to tell me that if I could see the world through his eyes, I'd understand why immigration is the big political driving force of our time. I've got another call from Malton. They're like bosses. Becky's there. Becky, what would you like to say?
Hi, I was rung up because actually John's actually my dad.
Pardon? Well, John in Malton, who was on before, is your father?
Yeah, and
Love
I
it.
disagree with my dad.
Tell me why.
Because I'm actually in my 3rd year of doing mental health nursing. I'm just about to graduate.
Oh, thank you.
So I am with the people on the ground, and I see the problems with the NHS as it actually is. And I see the absolute how the Tories have just ruined the NHS as well, and also I was saying to the person beforehand how it seems like every 10 years or every 5 years there's a switch of people to blame.
Yes.
Now it's immigration. Previously, beforehand, it was job seekers and people on benefits. Before that, it was people who had mental health issues.
Was it?
Yeah, in some respects.
Sure. I did. In terms of
like criminalising people and saying, oh, that person must have had mental illnesses and kind of...
Okay. I thought you were going to reach for single mothers, but we can agree to differ on who the sort of 2 minutes of hate was focused on at any given point. We can all agree that it's currently focused on immigrants, as your dad explained.
Yeah, yes. And I just see it as what I see is that they're saying it's people with immigration, and they're saying that it's people who've come over from these different countries because they don't have a voice. They can't say, actually, no, this is not right, and that's how I believe with it. And I think, the Tories know that, and they know that really not many people are going to believe them because they'll be like, well, you don't live here, you're not from this country, you don't understand what it's actually like. And they're going to go towards, actually, no, it's the immigration people, it's not actually the big bosses, it's not actually the people who are in power.
It's the fella I can see. It's the fella I can see in the waiting room sitting next to me speaking foreign to his wife. He's the reason why I can't get seen quicker. It's got nothing to do with investment in the NHS or whatever it is they've done since 2010 to see the patient satisfaction levels go from the highest they'd ever been to pretty close to the lowest.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in my last year and I see every single placement, because we have placements I've had, and I'm on my 6th placement now, the 3 months each time, and every single place I have gone to are understaffed, completely understaffed. There's never been, if we actually have a shift where all the nurses and everyone's on there, it's a complete surprise and a shock to everyone. And we have to hire in bank staff as well, which have to be paid 3 times the amount of pay.
Because they're on agencies that are privately run, which means a significant slice of that money is actually going to the investors in the agency rather than even the locum is getting paid too much anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And also...
Gear 3, Becky, Gear 3.
And also I see that it's all surface levels. I can only really say as much in the NHS because that's obviously what I'm doing.
But if you can't persuade your own dad, how are you going to persuade the rest of the country?
Well, that is the issue, isn't it? It's not, that is the problem. Obviously, me and my dad, as you see, we differ, but we always have, discussions. But it's really good with having open discussions.
Sure.
And we do disagree on this point.
But you're there. You're in the front line, and you say to him, Dad, this is what I see every day. I promise you, immigration is not the root of any of these problems. Yeah. And he says, no, it is, Becky.
Yeah, and I've been on job seekers before. I used to live in Derby at one point in a poverty-stricken area. I do know what it's like with different people from, immigration and things like coming over, but I see that they're not the reason for it. They're not the reason, like social's being cut, mental health's being cut. They're not the reason for it. And what the Tories do, which they do so well, is they do all the surface level stuff as well. They'll come into a hospital, they'll come into a care home, and they'll be like, right, we need to make sure that it looks really pretty. We have fruit out and everything like that. So the guests and the visitors come in and see this and go, oh, that's lovely. But they don't actually dig any further where they actually give people the best interventions, faster care and that, because they'll know that guests will just see surface level as well.
What or who speaks for you? Where do you feel yourself in terms of the established political parties? Where are you today?
See, I would want to vote like the Green Party in that, yes. But I know that could be easily a wasted vote in that respect, so I feel like I'd definitely probably go towards Labour in my vote.
With a sense that Jeremy Corbyn is the answer to some of the problems that you've described, or with a sense that that's kind of any port in a storm? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I just see it as whenever Labour's been into party, they have looked after the working class people and they've looked after the people who are actually on the ground.
And this is the beauty. This is the beauty of the UKipification of the Conservative Party, isn't it? Is that because of immigration, perfectly highlighted by your dad, who I don't want to beat up because he's not here. He's had his contribution, but decent decent fellas, convinced that immigration is the reason why X, Y and Z have happened. The Labour Party stands up and says, no, it isn't, and they'll get accused of being complicit and being responsible for it. I don't know the way out of it. It started in 2005. You're too young to remember. 2005 was when, for some reason, even though they won the next election, or they won that election, Labour stopped pushing back against the claim that immigrants were responsible for all of the country's problems, even though all of the measures, net contributors, the money there, the fact that we need, with our ageing, you'll know this better than I do as a medical professional, our ageing population, we are not going to give birth to enough people to look after them.
Yeah. I think it was just a scapegoat for everyone after the banking disaster, and obviously with people, terrorists happen and things. I think it was just a scapegoat. Let's quickly blame someone so we can put the focus on them.
Well, because the alternative was to blame the bankers, who we really, really need, until they start leaving post-Brexit, at which point we close our eyes and pretend we haven't noticed.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gear 4.
Yep.
Oh, Becky, happy days. Can I just say, at risk of sounding a little bit patronising, that the fact that a young woman like you has chosen to go into mental health nursing, it kind of means things can't be as bad as they sometimes feel.
There's a lot of us like this, don't worry.
Good, I do. I'm very glad to hear it. I had the privilege of speaking to some students a couple of weeks ago, and I came away with a bounce that hasn't been completely battered out of me yet, but it's probably only a matter of time. Becky, thank you. 11:41 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Sheena is in Hackney. Sheena, what would you like to say?
Hi, I am so one of the people you're talking about. I have no idea how I'm going to vote. I've always been Liberal, Labour supporting, but I don't like Jeremy Corbyn. I think he's a massive egotistical hypocrite that has just condemned us to another 5 years of Tory and
it's weird, isn't it?
Large majority.
In many ways, he's more interesting than the kind of sort of populist at the other extreme, which I suppose would still be Mr. Farage, in that you can understand his appeal. He's the one telling everyone that foreigners are to blame for everything. Corbyn, you describe as an egotist and sort of an essentially fraudulent character, while his supporters think he's beautifully principled. Why? Where's the disconnect? This fact, because I can understand the far right. Willful blindness, can't get out of second gear. I struggle to see it on the hard left. Do you understand it?
I have no idea. I don't know what it is lately that people are just, I don't know, they're ignoring politicians' flaws and just totally bigging them up for no... I don't understand why.
Well, you do. If it's all about a war against foreigners, everything makes sense. From Trump to Brexit to Theresa May's apparently unchallenged complete volte-face on what is good and what is bad for the country. If you frame everything as a war against foreigners, which is what the Daily Mail have been doing for 30 years, finally got right through to the mainstream, everything falls into place, doesn't it, or not?
I don't know. I'm still just... I don't know. Is that really why people are so blind?
Well, you give me a better explanation.
I don't know. I don't know. That's why I'm
What else is there? What else is there? People are voting to be poorer, less safe. They're voting to be losing their health care in America, giving tax cuts to the super rich. We're heading towards a privatised national health service. We're heading towards a dismantling of the welfare state. We're heading towards, just as happened with fire stations in London, we're going to see stuff currently owned by the country passed into the hands of the rich, who will then get richer and richer as it appreciates in value. And you're trying to work out why. And the answer is because if we're at war with foreigners and enough people believe it, then you can do whatever the hell you want as long as you keep feeding them hate.
Yeah, and with that is the rise of fake news, and people are just, I don't know if they're too lazy or too busy to actually find out the facts for themselves. They're just believing it.
You heard John in Malton before his daughter came on saying that people like him haven't got the time or the energy to find out the facts for themselves, so he'll go and look at the Mail and the Sun website and simultaneously, which is kind of a little bit Orwellian, it's the definition of doublespeak, he'll simultaneously look down his nose while also thinking that it's reality. Freedom is strength.
True. But I'm confused. I don't know who.
You're less confused than you were when you rang in.
No, I'm still just as confused.
About who you're going to vote for.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Not about how we've ended up where we are, perhaps. A little less confused about that. Yeah. But again, of course, I could be wrong. That's another curse of being a liberal, is the constant knowledge that you could be wrong. That's why I envy the extremes on both sides, who are utterly convinced that they're right. So convinced, of course, that they will be cheering the fact that they've lost their own healthcare and seen the money go instead to tax cuts for millionaires. Drain the swamp. You lost. Get over it. No, I didn't lose. I'm not losing my healthcare. could arguably be getting a tax cut. You lost, get over it. No. It's 11:45. Let's get back to politics for another 9 minutes or so. John in Malton, I think, is emblematic for me of today's programme, who rang in to describe the immigration situation in this country as being the main driving force of why we're voting in the way we're voting. He didn't specifically refer to the NHS, but the NHS is now the thing that the hate mongers point at first. What's the line they use? It's a national health service, not an international health service. Gear 2. Can we actually count the trade-off between nationality of patient, nationality of staff, payment of tax, age of patient, likelihood to need No, Gear 3, shut up. It's a national health service, not an international health service. Yeah, but how much money would you actually raise by charging? No, Gear 4, shut up. So instead of talking to his own daughter, third year as a mental health nurse, he gets his news from the Daily Mail and the Sun websites because, in his own words, he hasn't got the time or the energy to dig out the facts for himself. That's why we are where we are. It sounds like I'm sneering and condescending now. I'm not. I'll buy John a pint at Sam Smith's up in that part of the world, if memory serves. Happily, and his daughter. But you can't tell me that there's not something terrifying about getting your news from the Sun and the Mail, who are absolutely hell-bent on shifting units by casting foreigners in the enemy in an ongoing war. And the latest one is foreigners are trying to interfere in our election, says Theresa May, whose campaign is being run by Linton Crosby, who's Australian. Again, you just sit here and think, well, come on, everyone's going to... At least we can all agree on that being hypocritical, right? Foreigners are trying to interfere in our election, says a woman whose campaign's been run by an Australian. And whose chief cheerleader is a newspaper owned by an ex-Australian who's now American and doesn't pay any personal income tax in this country. Anyone? No? Second biggest cheerleader? Actually, biggest cheerleader. Daily Mail and General Trust, registered in Bermuda for tax purposes. Anyone still convinced that foreigners interfering in elections is the truth? She really meant it? No, because she's changed from the person who arrived at a view after looking at evidence into the person who throws out a soundbite and just watches it work. Let's look back, some of these politicians think, I've wasted my whole life trying to explain myself to voters. All I had to do was shout meaningless slogans like National Health Service, not International Health Service. We want our country back, make America great again. And it turns out that enough of the electorate are too stupid to even seek third gear. Give them Gear 1, the soundbite, give them Gear 2, the invented enemy. They'll never even bother with Gear 3. They don't need to. They've got what they need, something to chomp on. 11:53 is the time. Alex is in Chingford. Alex, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. It's just really a point. I mean, I'd love to think that the EU is a lovely, fluffy bunny, great organisation, but I don't.
Well, no one does. Even its supporters are well aware of its flaws and problems.
Starting my discourse with you, really, it's probably not a brilliant way to do it. But when I look at the photograph of Mr. Donald Tusk whispering our Prime Minister's ear in a rather creepy manner, I do have to wonder and conclude: is that really the case? And I don't
understand. So, is what really the case? And why was it creepy?
Well, it seems a bit creepy because if I was
it creepy when Donald Trump held her hand?
Well, I don't know. Depends in what the agenda for them together is in the future.
That's just word salad, mate.
If it's the EU,
so it's not creepy for Donald Trump to hold her hand, but it's creepy for Donald Tusk to whisper to her.
It's creepy if you consider Donald Trump to be some kind of evil entity hell bent on.
Well, it's creepy if you consider Donald Tusk to be. What's your evidence for that?
Well, because it just doesn't seem very friendly. It appears to me that there's... So if the watchword is friendly cooperation, that's what we should be doing as an EU member.
Yeah.
And then you send your Prime Minister to just do a little deal because the people of Britain are worried about the number of, the numbers coming to England, which is fine. I understand exactly why they do, by the way. I'll get onto that.
Don't count your chickens, pal.
So you send your Prime Minister there to say, hello, look, we've got a bit of a problem, could you help? And then you get laughed out of the door.
Because I mean, according to most analysts, if you're asking why that happened or what that says, that they genuinely, and they still can't believe that we would undertake an act of such epic self-harm. For the reasons, of course, in case you've missed it, for the reasons that Theresa May explains right here for you, Alex.
Well, there were plenty of voices suggesting what I should do in this. Of course, there were quite a lot of voices suggesting that I should go down the leave route. But as I say, I approach this decision in the way I approach other important decisions. Look at the facts and come to a view. And when I put all that together, when I think about the potential risk to jobs, the uncertainties for our economy if we were to leave the European Union, when I think about the security, the discussions I've had within the EU, because I do believe we are more secure in the EU.
So, to answer your question, what happened when David Cameron went there was that they turned around and said, A, well, you're not in Schengen, B, you're not in the euro, you've already got kind of the best deal available for any member country, and C, surely the British people are going to do what Theresa May does. You're going to look at the facts and arrive at a view that we're going to be less economically vibrant and less safe if we vote to leave. So, no, we're not going to give you anything else, mate, because there's no way that the country's going to be daft enough to leave.
There's the point I have trouble understanding. Why would we be worse off, and why would they seek to...
Ask Theresa May. Don't ask me. That was Theresa May.
Less financially secure. This can't be a friendly organisation that seeks to do that, surely.
Say again?
So that can't be a friendly organisation that seeks to do that, or would threaten to do that if you're not part of the club.
So what's the point of being in the club then, Alex?
Well, exactly. That's exactly why. So why be in it? So we might as well... If we're going to be
because if you're in the club...
You defend ourselves when necessary, as a country, as a nation.
Yeah, all right, mate.
Why do we need...
Get two.
It just seems to me that, the two bywords of friendly cooperation, it doesn't seem to me that...
Friendly cooperation is what the European are trying to talk about. Theresa May's talking about foreigners trying to sabotage our election.
I'm not sure they want friendly cooperation, though. It doesn't seem that way.
Why not?
Really...
Where are you getting your information from?
Well, I'm reading. I can speak French, so I can read the French press and all the rest of that. And if you read the French press and you listen to the kind of that they're trying to portray this country as some kind of backward racist entity, or some kind of third world, structure. It's absurd.
What French paper would you say was doing that?
Well, I mean, you've got your Le Figaro's, you've got your...
I know what they're called, but the editorial line of the newspaper that is portraying Britain as a backward racist backwater, which one would you point to first?
I would suggest the Jean-Paul Sartres of this world. Who come on Newsnight and say, look, we want to eradicate, all kinds of forms of Anglo-Saxon influence because it's our time now. We've been fighting for this for 300 years. He was on Newsnight. He explained it to everybody.
Okay.
Now, if that's the bigger plan behind something, and we are at risk from people that have got a different agenda to us and can't actually concede that friendly cooperation is the way forward, then we're better off out of it, James.
Yeah. And if we're worse off out of it, then you won't
James, we'll have to just try a bit harder and do what we've always done and be a little bit...
do what we've always done. Well, since 1973, we've cooperated with our European partners to forward our shared interests. So it won't be doing what we've always done, will it? It'll be doing whatever it was we did before that, when we were the sick man of Europe.
It would be the hopeful outcome, obviously. It really would be. But I've got a feeling their agenda isn't quite as...
Which is what we've just spent 2 hours explaining, mate, is exactly what you're supposed to think. We're at war with foreigners and it's all their fault.
Well, I don't buy that. But
that's what you just spent. You just spent 10 minutes telling me that's what you think.
I do think
they wish us harm and they're foreign.
No, it's not because they're foreign. I just don't understand why there has to be a threat to us of our economic prosperity and our...
They're not threatening our economic prosperity. They're agreeing with Theresa May that we're damaging it by leaving.
Why would we be damaging it by leaving if they're our friends?
Theresa May has explained why. We lose our trading arrangements with the largest single market in the world. We lose the shared security potentially that she's already put on the table as something that can be negotiated. We lose... mate, if you still need this explaining, Alex...
You had a democratic vote. Your people decided that you didn't want the EU anymore because, you want to do your own thing. That's fine. Now, what's wrong with that? And
nothing at all, mate. But as Theresa May said, doing your own thing involves commercial, economic and security penalties. She might have changed her mind, in which case I, for one, like you, Alex, can't wait to hear her explain why. But until she does explain why, either you trust her to lead the negotiations or you don't. And if you're trusting her to lead the negotiations, you're trusting a woman who thinks we shouldn't have done it, but has charged herself with making the best of a bad lot. Unfortunately, that doesn't make a very good Daily Mail headline or a very good campaigning slogan. I'm Theresa May, I'm making the best of a bad lot, which is why you've got the strong and stable, difficult woman nonsense.
Stop.